The great hall of the galactic confluence sparkled with lights from 1,000 different worlds. Marcus Chun stood near the refreshment station, watching aliens of every shape and size celebrate together. Some floated through the air. Others walked on 6 legs or slithered across the polished floor. The air smelled like a mixture of flowers, spices, and things Marcus couldn't even name. Tonight was special. Queen Jathera of the Velsharan Empire was celebrating her 1,000th year as ruler. 1,000 years. Marcus could barely imagine it. Back on Earth, 1,000 years ago, humans were still building castles and fighting with swords. Marcus adjusted his formal, diplomatic uniform and took a sip of his drink. It tasted like purple. He still wasn't used to alien beverages that had colors as flavors. Around him, diplomats and nobles from across the galaxy chatted and laughed. Most of them ignored the small group of humans in the corner. Humanity was new to galactic politics. They'd only had faster-than-light travel for 50 years. To these ancient species, humans were like children who just learned to walk. A sudden hush fell over the crowd. Marcus looked toward the main platform and saw her. Queen Jathera entered the hall like a living storm. She stood nearly 8 feet tall, with skin that shimmered between blue and silver. Her eyes glowed with a soft purple light, and when she moved, the air around her seemed to ripple. She wore robes that looked like they were woven from starlight itself. On her head sat a crown that floated inches above her skull, rotating slowly. The Velsharan were one of the oldest and most powerful species in the galaxy. They had psychic abilities that let them read thoughts, move objects with their minds, and communicate across vast distances. Their empire controlled thousands of star systems, and Queen Jathera was the most powerful of them all. She walked through the crowd, and everyone bowed. She smiled at some aliens and nodded at others. When she reached the section where the humans stood, she stopped, her glowing eyes fixed on Marcus. "Ah, the humans," she said. Her voice echoed in Marcus's mind as well as his ears. It was the Velsharan way of speaking. "Tell me, little diplomat, how does it feel to be so very young in such an old galaxy?" Marcus felt the weight of hundreds of eyes on him. This was a test. The queen was known for her pride and her love of putting others in their place, especially humans. "Your Majesty," Marcus said with a slight bow, "being young means we still have much to learn, but it also means we see things with fresh eyes. Sometimes the oldest empires forget what it's like to discover something for the first time." Several aliens gasped. No one spoke to the queen like that. The queen's eyes narrowed, but then she laughed. It was a sound like crystal bells ringing. Bold words from a species that can barely navigate hyperspace without getting lost, she said. The crowd laughed with her. "Your people have no psychic abilities. You cannot hear the songs of stars or feel the currents of probability. You are blind and deaf in a universe full of music." "Perhaps," Marcus replied calmly, "but blind people often develop other senses. We may not hear star songs, but we can measure their light and understand their patterns. We may not read minds, but we learn to read faces and voices. Different doesn't mean lesser, Your Majesty." The queen stepped closer. She was so tall that Marcus had to crane his neck to look at her face. Her expression was unreadable, but something flickered in her glowing eyes. Curiosity? Annoyance? Both? "You amuse me, human," she said slowly. "I think I shall make this celebration more interesting." She turned to address the entire hall. Her voice boomed in everyone's minds. "I, Queen Jathera, make this proclamation. If any human can guess my true name before the next lunar cycle ends, I shall marry them. Furthermore, humanity will gain unrestricted access to all Velsharan star lanes and trading posts." The hall erupted in shocked whispers. Marcus felt his heart skip a beat. The queen's true name? That was impossible. Every species knew that Velsharan true names were their most guarded secrets. The names weren't just words. They were psychic constructs containing memories, emotions, and the essence of who a person was. They existed in dimensions that most species couldn't even perceive. No outsider had ever guessed a Velsharan true name. Ever. The Queen looked down at Marcus with a smile that was both beautiful and cruel. What say you, bold human? Will you accept this challenge? Or will you admit that some things are beyond your primitive abilities? Marcus's mind raced. This was a trap. The Queen was setting him up to fail publicly, to humiliate humanity in front of the entire galaxy. If he refused, humans would look like cowards. If he accepted and failed, they would look like fools. But there was something else. Something in the way the Queen looked at him. Her smile was mocking, yes, but there was a challenge in her eyes that seemed almost hopeful. Marcus thought about his training. He thought about humanity's history of doing impossible things. Landing on the moon when everyone said it couldn't be done. Curing diseases that were thought incurable. Splitting the atom. Building computers that could think. Humans specialized in doing the impossible. I accept your challenge, Your Majesty, Marcus said clearly. The crowd gasped again. Someone behind Marcus whispered, "Is he insane?" The Queen's smile widened. Excellent. You have 30 days, Marcus Chun of Earth. 30 days to do what no one in galactic history has ever done. I look forward to your inevitable failure. She swept away, her robes trailing light behind her. The crowd began to buzz with conversation. Marcus stood still, wondering what he'd just gotten himself into. Ambassador Sarah Rodriguez grabbed his arm. Marcus, what were you thinking? This is suicide for your career. Maybe, Marcus said quietly, still watching the Queen disappear into the crowd. But did you see her face? For just a moment, she looked almost excited. Not mocking, excited. That doesn't make this any less impossible, Sarah said. Marcus smiled slightly. Impossible is just another word for no one's figured it out yet. We're humans. We're good at figuring things out. As the celebration continued around him, Marcus began planning. He had 30 days to do the impossible. 30 days to guess a name that existed beyond normal reality. 30 days to prove that humanity belonged in this ancient galaxy. Thought he had absolutely no idea how he was going to do it. But he was going to try anyway. That's what humans did best. Marcus's small apartment on the galactic confluence was crowded. He'd called in every favor he had to assemble this team. Dr. Sarah Kim sat at the main table, her fingers flying across a holographic keyboard. Next to her, Commander Jackson leaned back in his chair, reading reports on his datapad. In the corner, a blue hologram flickered to life. It was Archimedes, Earth's most advanced artificial intelligence. Let me get this straight, Jackson said, looking up from his pad. We have to guess a psychic alien name that exists in dimensions we can't see, made of emotions and memories we can't read, in a language we can't speak. And we have 27 days left. 26 days and 14 hours. Archimedes corrected in its calm, neutral voice. That's not helping, Archimedes, Marcus muttered, rubbing his tired eyes. He hadn't slept well since accepting the challenge. Dr. Kim looked up from her work. I've been researching Velsharan naming conventions for the past 2 days. Marcus, this is worse than we thought. Their true names aren't just names. They're like living data structures. Imagine if your entire personality, every memory, every feeling you've ever had was compressed into a single word that exists in 4-dimensional space. Can we learn to sense 4-dimensional space? Marcus asked. Not in 26 days, Kim said flatly. Not in 26 years. Maybe not ever. Humans didn't evolve psychic abilities. Our brains are wired differently. Marcus stood and walked to the window. Outside, Alien ships of every design docked and departed from the massive station. Then, we need to approach this differently. We can't do what the Volsharan do. So what can we do that they can't? Get frustrated and drink coffee? Jackson suggested, holding up his mug. Marcus turned back to the room with a slight smile. No, we can think like humans. Archimedes, what makes human cognition unique compared to psychic species? The AI's hologram brightened slightly as it processed. Human beings developed advanced pattern recognition and analytical thinking specifically because they lack psychic abilities. Where psychic species intuited information, humans had to observe, measure, and deduce. This led to the development of advanced mathematics, the scientific method, and complex behavioral analysis. Behavioral analysis, Marcus repeated slowly. We study people by watching what they do, not by reading their minds. Kim leaned forward. You're thinking we can reconstruct her name from her behavior. Why not? A person's name reflects who they are, right? And who you are shows in what you do. Every decision, every action, every word. If we can analyze enough of the Queen's behavior, maybe we can work backward to figure out her name. Jackson frowned. That's a huge maybe, Marcus. I know, but it's the only maybe we've got. Over the next week, Marcus became obsessed. The team gathered information from every source they could find. They interviewed diplomats who had met the Queen. They watched recordings of her public appearances going back decades. They analyzed her decisions, her policies, her trade agreements. Every tiny detail went into their database. Other species representatives started visiting Marcus's apartment. An insectoid ambassador from the Chiton Collective stopped by to wish him luck. No one has ever guessed a Velsharan true name. The ambassador clicked through his translator. Your effort is admirable but futile. A floating gas being from the Nebula Consortium told him, the Queen is playing with you, human. She knows you cannot win. This is entertainment for her. Even friendly aliens thought he was wasting his time. But Marcus kept working. On day 12, the Queen herself appeared at his door. Marcus nearly dropped his coffee when he opened it. Your Majesty, he stammered, bowing quickly. I wasn't expecting. Clearly, she said, gliding past him into the apartment. She looked around at the mess of papers, holographic displays, and empty food containers. This is where Earth's champion works. How charmingly primitive. Dr. Kim and Jackson had scrambled to their feet, bowing. The Queen ignored them, her attention fixed on Marcus. I was curious, she said. Most beings would have given up by now. Or perhaps tried to bribe me. Or hire a psychic to attempt reading my mind. But you're doing research like a scholar preparing for exams. It's adorable. We work with what we have, Your Majesty, Marcus said carefully. The Queen picked up one of his datapads, scanning through his notes with a look of amusement. You think you can understand a Velsharan through statistics and observation? Our names exist beyond your comprehension. Maybe, Marcus agreed. But everything leaves traces. Every choice you make, every policy you enact, every word you speak tells us something about who you are. You may hide your true name, but you can't hide yourself. Something flickered across the Queen's face. Surprise? For just a moment, her confident mask slipped. Then it was back, and she smiled her sharp smile. How philosophical. Very well. Continue your futile quest. I look forward to your failure. She turned to leave, then paused at the door. Though I must admit, no one has ever tried quite this approach before. It's almost refreshing. After she left, Jackson let out a long breath. Did she just compliment us? I'm not sure, Marcus said slowly. He was staring at the datapad the Queen had touched. Archimedes, replay the security footage of the Queen's visit. Focus on her emotional responses. The AI projected the footage. They watched it 3 times. On the third viewing, Marcus saw it. When he'd said, "You can't hide yourself," the Queen's hands had tightened slightly. Her eyes had widened just a fraction. Her smile had frozen for exactly half a second. "She's lonely," Marcus said quietly. "What?" Kim asked. "Look at her reaction. She's been queen for 1,000 years. 1,000 years of people bowing and scraping. 1,000 years of being worshipped and feared. When was the last time someone actually tried to understand her? Not her power, not her position, her." Jackson whistled softly. "You're saying this whole challenge is a test. I'm saying maybe it's more than just a way to humiliate us. Maybe she actually wants someone to succeed." Kim frowned. "That's a big assumption, Marcus." "I know. But think about it. She could have made any wager. She could have challenged us to a psychic contest or a show of military strength. But she chose something that requires understanding her. Specifically, understanding her." Archimedes spoke up. "If your hypothesis is correct, then the Queen's true name must reflect this loneliness and desire for connection. This changes our analytical approach significantly." Marcus nodded, new energy flowing through him. "Archimedes, start a new analysis branch. Look for patterns of isolation in her behavior. Times when she seemed to want connection but maintained distance. Decisions that prioritize duty over personal desire." "Analyzing," the AI responded. Marcus looked at his team. They were exhausted, running on coffee and determination. But there was hope in their eyes now. "We're not trying to crack a code," Marcus said. "We're trying to understand a person. And that's something humans are actually good at." 7 days remained. Marcus stared at the holographic display floating above his desk, showing a complex web of data points connected by glowing lines. Each point represented something the Queen had said or done over her 1,000-year reign. There were millions of them. "It's not working," Jackson said, slumped in his chair with his 5th cup of coffee. "We have all this data, but it's just noise. We're no closer to her name than we were 3 weeks ago." Marcus knew Jackson was right. They'd gathered more information about Queen Jathera than anyone in galactic history. They'd analyzed her speeches, her trade agreements, her diplomatic decisions, even the way she decorated her throne room. But a Velsharan true name wasn't just information. It was something deeper. Something they were missing. Dr. Kim walked in, looking as tired as Marcus felt. She'd been in the station's library for 16 hours straight. "I found something," she said, her voice hoarse. "It might be nothing, but what is it?" Marcus asked. Kim pulled up a new holographic display. It showed old Velsharan texts, the symbols flowing and shifting like living things. Velsharan names can't be translated into other languages. Everyone knows that. But I realized we've been thinking about translation wrong. "What do you mean?" Jackson asked, sitting up straighter. "We've been trying to understand the name directly. But what if we approach it like reverse engineering? We can't read the blueprint, but we can examine what the blueprint built." Marcus felt a spark of excitement. "You're saying we can reconstruct the name from its effects?" "Exactly. A person's true name shapes who they are, right? So who they are should reflect their true name. If we map out her personality, her values, her deepest motivations, we should be able to work backward to the name that created that personality." Archimedes' hologram flickered. "This approach has theoretical merit. However, it would require precise behavioral modeling beyond current analytical standards." "But not beyond human standards," Marcus said, starting the pace. "This is what humans do. We don't have psychic powers, so we learn to read body language. We learn psychology. We learn to understand people by watching them, listening to them, caring about them." Kim pulled up more data. "I've been analyzing patterns in the Queen's decision-making. Look at this. 300 years ago, she had a chance to expand her empire by conquering the Theta systems. It would have been easy, but she didn't. Instead, she offered them a fair trade agreement. Maybe she was being strategic, Jackson suggested. That's what I thought at first. But look at this. And this. And this. Kim highlighted dozens of similar decisions across centuries. Time after time, when she could have used force, she chose diplomacy. When she could have dominated, she chose cooperation. It's not strategy. It's who she is. It's in her nature. Marcus studied the patterns. Kim was right. There was a consistency to the Queen's behavior that went beyond politics or power. It was like a melody running through her life, the same notes played over and over in different ways. Archimedes, Marcus said, can you create a behavioral model based on this data? I want to know not just what the Queen did, but why. What drives her? What does she value most? Processing, the AI responded. This will take approximately 4 hours. Those 4 hours felt like 4 days. Marcus couldn't sleep. He kept thinking about the Queen, about the loneliness he'd seen in her eyes during her visit, about how someone could rule for 1,000 years and still feel alone. When Archimedes finished, the results appeared as a complex, three-dimensional model rotating in the air. It looked almost like a sculpture made of light, with different colors representing different aspects of the Queen's personality. Analysis complete, Archimedes announced. The subject displays consistent patterns of self-isolation despite desire for connection. She values challenge and intellectual stimulation. She respects strength but prefers diplomacy. She is driven by duty but constrained by tradition. Most significantly, she exhibits signs of seeking validation through challenge rather than submission. Marcus stared at the model. She's looking for an equal. What? Kim asked. That's what this is all about. She's the most powerful being in her empire. Everyone bows to her. Everyone fears her or worships her. But no one challenges her. No one sees her as anything except a queen. Marcus pointed at the model. Look at these patterns. She doesn't want people to bow. She wants people to stand up. That's why she was excited when I accepted her challenge. Jackson frowned. But why make the challenge impossible? Because anything less wouldn't mean anything, Marcus said, understanding flowing through him. If she asked an easy question, anyone could answer it. But this challenge requires something special. It requires someone who won't give up. Someone who'll look at impossible and say, I'll try anyway. Someone who'll try to understand her, really understand her, instead of just obeying her. Kim's eyes widened. Marcus, if you're right, then her true name isn't just what she is. It's what she wants to be, or what she's looking for. Archimedes, can we model what her current true name would be based on her current psychological state? The AI paused. Valcharan names evolve throughout their lives, reflecting personal growth and change. Based on the behavioral analysis, I can generate a probability matrix of likely name constructs. Numbers and symbols began flowing across the displays. Marcus watched them, but he wasn't really seeing the data. He was thinking about the Queen, about how she'd touched that data pad, about the look in her eyes when she said his approach was refreshing. Late that night, Marcus was alone in his apartment when the Queen appeared again. This time, she didn't knock. The door simply opened, and she was there, glowing softly in the darkness. You should be sleeping, she said. You look terrible. Can't sleep, Marcus admitted. Too much to think about. The Queen walked to the window, looking out at the stars. I've been watching your progress. You and your team. You're actually getting close to something. I didn't expect that. Would you like me to fail, Your Majesty? She was quiet for a long moment. I'm not sure anymore. Marcus joined her at the window. Can I ask you something? And I want an honest answer, not a political one. You may ask. I'll decide if I want to answer honestly. When was the last time someone surprised you? The Queen turned to look at him, her glowing eyes unreadable. What an odd question, isn't it? You've lived for over 1,000 years. You've seen empires rise and fall. You have powers I can barely imagine. When was the last time anything was actually new to you? The Queen was silent. Then, so quietly that Marcus almost didn't hear it, she said, "The day you accepted my challenge." She left after that, disappearing as silently as she'd arrived. But Marcus stood at the window for a long time, thinking. He finally understood. The Queen's true name wasn't about power or pride. It was about 1,000 years of loneliness and the hope that somewhere, someone might be different enough, brave enough to truly see her. Marcus returned to his desk with new determination. He had 7 days left. 7 days to do the impossible. But for the first time since accepting the challenge, he believed he actually could. The Grand Assembly Hall was packed. Every major species in the galaxy had sent representatives to witness Marcus's attempt. Some came to see him succeed. Most came to watch him fail. The air buzzed with thousands of different languages being spoken at once, filtered through translators into a constant hum of noise. Marcus stood in the center of the hall, feeling very small. Above him, viewing platforms held hundreds of aliens. Some had eyes. Some had sensors. Some perceived reality in ways Marcus couldn't even understand. All of them were watching him dot at the far end of the hall. Queen Jathera sat on a throne made of crystal that seemed to grow directly from the floor. She wore ceremonial robes that changed color as she breathed, flowing through shades of blue and purple and silver. Her crown floated above her head, spinning slowly. She looked every bit the powerful, ancient ruler she was. Marcus tried not to think about what would happen if he failed. The humiliation for humanity. The lost opportunity for access to Vel'Sharan space. The end of his diplomatic career. He pushed those thoughts away and focused on what he'd learned over the past month. Ambassador Sarah Rodriguez stood nearby, looking worried. Jackson and Dr. Kim were in the crowd. Archimedes watched through the station's network. They'd all worked so hard. Now it was up to Marcus to finish what they'd started. A Vel'Sharan official stepped forward, his voice echoing in everyone's minds. The time has come. Human diplomat Marcus Chun, you have accepted Queen Jathera's challenge. You must now guess her true name or admit failure. What is your answer? The hall fell silent. Marcus took a deep breath. Your Majesty, he began, his voice steady despite his racing heart. Before I answer, I need to explain something. Not just to you, but to everyone here. The Queen raised one elegant hand. Speak. Marcus walked forward a few steps. Humans don't have psychic abilities. We can't read minds or sense thoughts. When we first joined the galactic community, many species saw this as a weakness. And in many ways, it is. We can't do what the Vel'Sharan do. We can't perceive dimensions that are invisible to us. Some aliens in the crowd nodded. Others made sounds of agreement. Marcus continued. But because we couldn't read minds, humans developed other skills. We learned to watch, to listen, to understand people not through their thoughts, but through their actions. We created mathematics to understand patterns. We developed psychology to understand behavior. We built sciences around the simple idea that if you observe something carefully enough, you can understand it. The Queen leaned forward slightly, her eyes fixed on Marcus. So when I accepted this challenge, I knew I couldn't approach it the way a Vel'Sharan would. I had to approach it the way a human would. My team and I spent a month studying you, Your Majesty. Not as a queen, but as a person. We analyzed every decision you've made, every speech you've given, every policy you've enacted over your 1,000-year reign. Marcus pulled out a small device. A holographic display appeared above his hand, showing the complex web of data they'd assembled. The crowd murmured in surprise. "And we found patterns," Marcus said. "Consistent patterns that reveal who you are at your core. Based on those patterns, I believe I know your true name." The hall erupted in whispers. Several aliens stood, shouting that this was impossible. The Velsharan official raised his hands for silence. "Speak your guess," the Queen said. Her voice was perfectly calm, but Marcus thought he saw her hands tighten on her throne's armrests. Marcus nodded. "Your true name at the time of your coronation was approximately this." He spoke a phrase in the Velsharan language, stumbling over the psychic components but getting the emotional essence across, which translates roughly to, "She, who burns with the light of 1,000 suns yet casts shadow on herself." The Velsharan and the crowd gasped. The Queen's eyes widened in shock. Marcus pressed on. "That name reflects your power and your pride, but also your self-isolation. The light that makes you brilliant also keeps others at a distance." "Am I close?" The Queen stood slowly. The entire hall held its breath. That is remarkably close to my coronation name. But it is not my current true name. Velsharan names evolve with experience." "You have failed," but Marcus smiled. "I know. That's why I'm not done." The Queen froze. "What?" "Your coronation name reflected who you were 1,000 years ago. But people change, especially over 1,000 years. Your true name has evolved with you." Marcus stepped closer to the throne. "I realized something during this challenge, Your Majesty. You didn't set this wager to humiliate humanity. You set it because you were looking for something specific." "And what would that be?" the Queen asked. Her voice was cold, but Marcus could hear something else underneath. "Uncertainty? Hope? You were looking for someone who could truly see you. Not your power, not your position. You. Someone who would try to understand you rather than just obey you. Someone who would stand before you as an equal, not as a subject." Marcus spoke another phrase in Velsharan, this one flowing more naturally. "Your current true name is She, who sought challenge find an equal." The silence that followed was absolute. The Queen stared at Marcus, her face cycling through emotions too quickly to track. Shock, disbelief, wonder, something that looked like joy. Then her knees gave out, and she sat back down heavily on her throne. "How?" she whispered. "How could you possibly?" "Because the challenge itself was part of your name," Marcus explained gently. "You set an impossible task because you wanted someone impossible to solve it. You needed proof that somewhere in this galaxy there was someone who could see past your crown and your power. Someone who would try to understand you, not as a queen, but as a person." A Velsharan noble stood up, his voice angry. "This is a trick. He cannot have guessed the true name." But the Queen raised her hand and the noble fell silent. She looked at Marcus with an expression he'd never seen on her face before. Vulnerability. "Every word you spoke is true," she said quietly. "You have guessed my true name. Not by psychic power, but by something I had not anticipated. Understanding. Real, genuine understanding." The hall exploded in noise. Aliens shouted in dozens of languages. Some demanded proof. Others called it impossible. Some applauded. Marcus stood still, watching the Queen. She met his eyes across the crowded hall. And for the first time in centuries, Queen Jathura of the Velsharan Empire smiled a real smile. Not a political smile. Not a mocking smile. A genuine expression of happiness. The assembly hall took nearly an hour to calm down. Aliens argued and debated in every corner. Some Velsharan nobles demanded that the Queen reject Marcus's answer. Others insisted that the ancient laws must be honored. Through it all, Queen Jathera sat on her throne, and thoughtful, her eyes never leaving Marcus. Finally, she stood. The hall fell silent instantly. "I will speak," she announced, her voice resonating in every mind present. "And all will listen." She descended from her throne, walking across the hall until she stood directly in front of Marcus. Up close, he could see that her hands were shaking slightly. For a being of such immense power, she suddenly seemed very human in her nervousness. "Marcus Chen of Earth," she said formally. "You asked me to explain how you discovered my true name. I believe all assembled here deserve an explanation as well." She turned to address the crowd. "For over 1,000 years, I have ruled the Velsharan Empire. I have made decisions that affected billions. I have negotiated treaties and ended wars. I have been called wise and powerful and fair. But in all that time, every being who approached me did so with fear or worship. They saw my crown, my power, my throne. They never saw me." Her voice grew softer. "Loneliness is a strange thing. You can be surrounded by millions and still feel completely alone. I began to wonder if there was anyone in this vast galaxy who could look at me and see beyond the Queen. Someone who would treat me not as a goddess or a tyrant, but as a person who has doubts and hopes and fears like anyone else." She gestured to Marcus. "So I set a challenge. I made it seem impossible because I needed it to be difficult. If the answer came easily, it would mean nothing. I needed someone who would look at an impossible task and try anyway. Someone stubborn enough, curious enough, compassionate enough to spend a month trying to understand me rather than control me or worship me." A Velsharan elder spoke up. "Your Majesty, this human had no psychic abilities. How can you be certain he truly understood your name?" The Queen smiled. "Because he understood something even more important. He understood me. My name is not just words Psych constructs. It is who I am. And he saw who I am more clearly than any psychic ever has." She turned back to Marcus. "You didn't just guess my name. You comprehended my loneliness. You saw my desire for challenge and connection. You understood that I set this test not to humiliate your species, but because I desperately hoped someone would pass it." Marcus felt his throat tighten with emotion. "I'm honored, Your Majesty." "You should be," she said with a hint of her old sharpness, though her eyes were kind. "Now we come to the matter of my promise. I stated that if a human guessed my true name, I would marry them and grant humanity access to all Velsharan space." The hall buzzed with renewed whispers. The Queen raised her hand for silence. "I will honor my word. Humanity will have unrestricted access to our star lanes and trading posts. This I grant freely, as you have earned it through cleverness and determination." She paused, and something changed in her expression. The formality fell away, leaving only genuine emotion. "But the marriage offer? I will leave that choice to you, Marcus Chun." Marcus blinked in surprise. "Your Majesty? When I made this wager, I thought of it as a political arrangement, a prize for an impossible achievement. But you've taught me something these past weeks. You've reminded me that relationships should be built on understanding and respect, not obligations and bets." She looked at him with those glowing eyes, and he saw vulnerability there. "I am asking you, not as a queen to a subject, but as one person to another. Would you choose to marry me because you want to, or only because a wager demands it?" The entire galaxy seemed to hold its breath. Marcus stood before the most powerful being in known space, and she was giving him a choice. A real choice. Marcus thought about the past month, the long nights studying her behavior, the gradual realization of her loneliness. The moment he truly understood what she was looking for. He'd spent weeks trying to understand this alien queen, and somewhere along the way, he'd come to genuinely admire her. Not her power, not her position, her, the person underneath the crown who made careful decisions and valued fairness, who had ruled for 1,000 years with wisdom and grace, who was brave enough to set an impossible challenge in hopes of finding connection. "Your Majesty," Marcus said slowly, "when I accepted your challenge, I did it for humanity. To prove we belonged in the galactic community. To show that humans could achieve impossible things." He saw disappointment flicker across her face. But he continued, "But over this past month, something changed. I learned about you. Not just data points and behavior patterns, but you. I learned about your sense of duty and your hidden kindness. I learned about your strength and your loneliness. And somewhere in that process, this stopped being about humanity's reputation or political advantage." He stepped closer. "I'm not accepting because a wager demands it. I'm accepting because I want to. Because I think we could be good for each other. You need someone who sees you as a person. And I think I need someone who challenges me to be better than I thought I could be." For a long moment, the Queen simply stared at him. Then she laughed. It was a sound of pure joy, like crystal bells ringing across water. "You realize," she said, wiping at her eyes, "that I am over 1,000 years old, from a completely different species, and can kill people with my thoughts?" Marcus grinned. "I do. You realize I'm a human who can barely navigate hyperspace, has no psychic abilities, and will probably embarrass you at formal dinners?" "I do," she said, still smiling. "Then I think we'll be fine." The Queen took his hand. Hers was warm and hummed with barely contained energy. "Marcus Chen of Earth, you have done something no one has ever done before. You've made me feel less alone. That's what humans do best, Your Majesty. We connect. We understand. We care. Even when it's difficult. Especially when it's difficult." She leaned down and touched her forehead to his. It was a Velsharan gesture of deep respect and affection. "Call me Jathara," she whispered. "When we're alone, you don't need to call me Your Majesty." "Jathara," Marcus said, testing the name. It felt right that the assembly hall erupted in cheers. Some were shocked. Some were thrilled. Some were probably already worried about the political implications. But Marcus didn't care about any of that right now. He'd come to this station a month ago, as just another human diplomat trying to prove his species belonged in the galaxy. He'd accepted an impossible challenge. And now he stood hand in hand with an alien queen, who had been looking for someone to truly see her for 1,000 years. Ambassador Rodriguez approached, tears streaming down her face. "Marcus, you magnificent idiot. You actually did it." "We did it," Marcus corrected. "Kim, Jackson, Archimedes, you, all of humanity. We proved that being different isn't being lesser. We showed that humans have something valuable to offer this galaxy." Dr. Kim hugged him tightly. "What do we offer?" Marcus looked at Jathara, who was watching him with warmth in her glowing eyes. "We offer understanding, connection, the ability to see people for who they really are, not what they appear to be. That's the human gift." In the months that followed, the marriage of Queen Jathara and Marcus Chun became legendary across the galaxy. The Velsharan Empire and humanity formed an unprecedented alliance. Human behavioral scientists worked with Velsharan psychics, combining analytical thinking with intuitive understanding. Together, they solved problems neither could have addressed alone. But for Marcus and Jathara, the real story was much simpler. It was about two beings from completely different worlds who found connection through understanding. About a queen who had been alone for 1,000 years, finding someone who saw her. About a human who took an impossible challenge and succeeded not through power, but through compassion. On their wedding day, Jathara gave Marcus a gift. It was a small crystal that glowed with soft purple light. "What is it?" he asked. "A piece of my true name," she said. "Crystallized into physical form. So you'll always remember that you were the one who truly understood it. Marcus held the crystal carefully, watching light dance within it. You know what the funny thing is? I was terrified every single day of that challenge. I was sure I was going to fail. Jathera smiled and kissed his forehead. That's what made it meaningful. You tried anyway. And that, Marcus thought, was the most human thing of all. Looking at the impossible and trying anyway. Looking at someone different and trying to understand them anyway. Building bridges instead of walls. Seeking connection instead of isolation. That's what humanity brought to the galaxy. Not the greatest weapons or the fastest ships or the strongest psychic powers, but the simple, stubborn determination to understand and connect, no matter how difficult it was enough. It was more than enough. It was everything.